I'm with Heather today. This is Industry Innovators, the second episode following the episode with Jerome Vaughan last week. Heather, just most people know you, but just to briefly introduce yourself, tell people who you are, what you do, and excited to get over the interview today.
Yeah, sure. I'm great to be here. Excited that you invited me and looking forward to it. So I'm Heather Carroll. I have been in the supply chain space for goodness, probably 20 plus years now. I hate to say, but I've spent a lot of time mostly in the software space. So I started out working in AI for retailers, and from there I went to a company, then was part of the management team on a warehouse execution software called Redworks. Redworks was then acquired by Dematic, and I spent about 15 years total with Redworks and Dematic, working in various roles and leadership positions there. And then I went on to work for Takeoff as Chief Customer Officer, focused on micro fulfillment and their customer base. And then I left Takeoff and went to Covariant, and I was the Chief Revenue Officer for Covariant, and had global responsibility for all go-to-market functions.
In your opinion, at the moment, you've seen a variety of challenges that end users are facing. So what key challenges have you seen in your various roles that end users face, and how can you offer them viable solutions to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen across the various different applications that are implemented, automated solutions, is a lot of times when you work with a supplier, you're looking at a very specific part of your warehouse or your order fulfillment process. So you're looking for automation to take walking out of your picking process, or you're looking for automation to drive your receiving process. And what tends to happen is you end up speeding up that one area of your building, and that's great, and you hope to achieve the ROI that has been presented to you from the supplier for what can be done in that one area of the building. But what often happens is customers struggle to get the full benefit out of the solution because it hasn't taken into effect the upstream and downstream consequences of what's going to happen to your total operation when you optimize just one area. And that I've seen be consistent, whether it was software solutions that were being put into place without considering what the impact of the mechatronics would be or what the impact of the people would be. And then move forward, all through the Redworks and Dematic and the Covariant time. And now people are putting in robots to replace a function that a person's doing. And oftentimes what gets overlooked is the change management piece and the consideration for what it's going to do to your workflow upstream and downstream.
Yeah. In my own experience, I've seen loads of sales leaders kind of comment on similar impacts. There's a lot of the times, even kind of backing up before the automation piece comes in, you go into warehouses, you see practices where the operations aren't fully optimized. There's no kind of industrial engineering, continuous improvement to get the full efficiency out of a manual operation before even automation can be considered. So there's so many things for end users to consider, and we're in a time now where acquiring capital and the cost of money is so much higher. So how have you seen kind of solutions adapt over the last couple of years to account for the increasing cost of money?
Yeah, so we've seen the rise of SaaS type solutions, software as a service or robot as a service, where OpEx can be used instead of capital. And that has been something that we've seen a lot, particularly in the robotics space, over the last 18 to 24 months. That's a way to help companies address that capital constraint, but it's also very cash consumptive for those suppliers that are offering those services. So I think while we've seen that over the last 18 to 24 months as a solid way to purchase some of these solutions, I think we're going to see a shift where as capital becomes tighter, it's also becoming tighter for those suppliers. And so I think we're going to start seeing a shift in the market of how some of these companies are going to market with these solutions as well.
Yeah, and talking about go-to-market, you've been a go-to-market executive for as many years as we can say, 20 years plus. So Um, in your own kind of way and in your various roles, what have been the key ingredients to creating a high-performing sales culture and a high-performing sales team?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. So one of the things that I think is critical is really building the right team. And that has to do with really leveraging your network,
Yeah,
and working with people that and working with people that have produced an outcome or results in their prior roles.
yeah,
That's not always possible when you're building a team, especially when you want to bring in younger folks into this space. You need to look for different attributes in those people. And it's not always the education, it's not always where they went to school or what their GPA was. Those things are good, but to me, the more important thing is really looking for someone that has grit. And I don't know if
mm,
you've read Angela Duckworth's book. It was Grit and the Power of Passion and Perseverance,
yeah,
but it's fantastic. And she did this extensive study and found and started really with graduates of West Point
yeah,
and took all the way through looking at what makes someone successful. And the common element is this concept of grit. And that's just being able to focus on something and stick with it no matter how hard it is for an extended period of time. And so that element is something I always look for. That to me is way more important than where you went to school, honestly, because if you've been able to stick with something and persevere and get through that, that's what it takes in this environment, because we're going to have ups and downs in the market. And as a
yeah,
salesperson, you're going to have feast or famine. And so are you going to fall apart and not be able to handle it when things get tough? Or are you going
yeah.
to dig in and just find a way to push through that and come out on the other side better? And so that to me is the number one element that I look for when I'm putting a team together.
Yeah. Well, that's I mean that's a very good place to start. You introduced the kind of theory or the element of working with people that you know can produce results. And if you look at I guess if you look at the industry, if you look at the change in the sales landscape, we just touched on the robots as a service model. It's a change in the kind of sales structure of warehouse automation, working with people that you know. I imagine that can be really reassuring, especially in a changing sales landscape. So number one, yeah, absolutely agree with you there. And then the second one would be the idea. I've actually read the book, so the idea of perseverance, the idea of having someone with grit, somebody that can really get into a project is, I imagine, one of your non-negotiables in how you hire and how you have hired in the past.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, someone took a chance on me. And so, and that started this whole thing for me. And
Yeah,
it is true. And especially when you're looking at, we need to be bringing younger folks into this industry and into this space. And we need to be bringing diversity into this space as well. When I was at
yeah,
Dematic, I was one of the co-founders of our diversity, equity, inclusion group. And it was really about bringing all kinds of voices
yeah,
into the company and into the industry and to our customers, because we as suppliers, our teams and our business should reflect our customers teams and their
yeah.
businesses, and you need to have that level of diversity on your teams. And so that's also something else that I look for.
Yeah, yeah, it touches on obviously the next question being, as employers and employees, how can we encourage more diversity and encourage more women and to consider a career in the supply chain industry? Because what I've typically seen is a male dominated industry. You're a female leader, so you'd be able to provide some incredible insight on how we can encourage, more diversity from a gender perspective.
Yeah, I think I remember when RELA, the Retail Industry Leaders Association, first started their Women in Supply Chain group
Yeah,
at the very first RELA. And it was small, and it was these amazing women in retail. And there weren't a lot that were from suppliers. These were mostly women from large retailers. And I remember being in that room, and there may have been 30 of us, 25.
yeah,
If you go to that conference now this year, you can't fit all the people in the room. And what they
yeah,
did was they reached out to everybody. It is a women's group, but there are a lot of men in that group too. And that awareness and the ability to tap into those voices as well to help get advocates in the rest of the organization. I mean, everybody's got a mom. Lots of people have sisters. Lots of people have wives, and they want the best for their families. And so it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think more often than not, there's a lot of openness to it. And I think by opening the doors to those groups so that you're having more conversations around it is a great start.
Yeah. So you've got kind of groups like Relearn. Obviously, we saw a huge push kind of, it must have been in the last 10 years around women in STEM, especially for those engineering disciplines. You talk to the platform for discussion at supply chain events in Relearn and the actual group itself, but what can we do from more of an early careers perspective? For example, women in STEM, what can we do to encourage more diversity there too?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm in a women in AI group. And
Nice.
one of the things that we talk about often is what are we doing to go out to the high schools where our kids go to school to speak? What are we doing to go out to colleges and be a guest speaker at a program to talk to women about, hey, these are opportunities out there. What are we doing with our HR teams and our people teams to say, hey, are we going to these conferences and do we have good representation to make sure we're talking to a broad group of students that would be interested in this or might be a great candidate to take this path that they weren't aware of. I find a lot of it honestly starts at conversations at home, conversations with your kids' friends, and conversations at school when they're just getting started and just taking those first science courses that spark an interest. That's where a lot of it starts from. And if you can start to see yourself reflected in those positions and other places, it begins to really start turning in your mind that, oh, that's something I can do too.
Yeah. You've been in the industry for 20 years now. So we talk about what can we do now to bring more people, more women into the warehouse automation and supply chain industries. But what got you into warehouse automation, robotic software? Why did you join the industry?
That's a funny question. So I worked for an AI company, a software company in Nashville, where I live. And this was back in the late 90s when no one had heard of AI. But I was with that company for 9 years, and we grew it to about 450 people. I think I was the 12th employee when I started. But I was on the management team. We grew the company and we sold it to a private equity firm. And after that, I stayed on for about 4 years to help that company new leadership transition. And I worked with, opening our offices in Europe and doing lots of cool, fun things, but I was on the road all the time. At the time, my family was really young. My kids were really young. So at the end of that 4 years, I just said, I'm going to stay home. I need to figure out what I want to do. I had some equity in the company and it was a great ride. And I'd been home maybe, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks. And I'd get a phone call from the CFO of that former company in Nashville, as well as the SVP of operations. And they had gone to this little company in Austin, Texas called RedWorks. And they called me and said, hey, let's do it again. We don't have anyone here that knows how to sell into retail and how to build a go-to-market team. Come do this again with us. And at that point, I'd never stepped foot in a warehouse. I didn't have a clue what one looked like. And so at first I was like, yeah, I'll consult with you guys for a little bit and see if there's a good fit here. And after doing that and seeing some successes with some very large retailers that were interested, I got pretty excited, and that's how I got there. So.
Nice. Yeah. So it was, I guess, being influenced by somebody kind of in your life and somebody who was excited about it, who shared that excitement with you, that got you into the space.
Yeah. And knowing that the skills that we had to take a technology that at the time no one had heard of, it was an AI-based configurator. It was so much like going to RedWorks when RedWorks had a warehouse execution system in the early 2000s, and no one had ever heard that term. So there were a lot of similarities. It was a disruptive technology. It was a new space. It was going to be something that was difficult to explain to customers what they were buying. And all of those challenges I really loved. And building a team again and being able to do that from the ground up, with the goal of building the company and then having an exit strategy, was exciting. And so we did that. And I was there for 9 years and we sold to Dematic. And then I was at Dematic for another 6 years after that.
Amazing. Wow. So we've touched kind of on what we can do to encourage more diversity, more women in supply chain and careers in supply chain. And you just recently touched on innovative technology at its time, the WES system. We've talked about disruptive technology in what Covariant have done, what Takeoff have done. So 2023 has been an interesting year so far. What have your top technology innovation picks been, if you could just pick 3 for this year?
Yeah. I know everybody says it, but I have to say it because it is so true in this space right now. And it's
Yeah.
Chat GPT.
Okay.
Because prior to Chat GPT, you would go in and talk to a chief supply chain officer about the benefits of AI robotics. And it was just go right. You could see it glazed over. Yeah. I should care about this, but nobody even knows what AI is. I don't really, But once people saw Chat GPT and downloaded it or got on the site and started playing with it,
Yeah.
once they could see what it would do, and then you started seeing these articles where it was passing, the LSAT and
Yeah, I
passing
saw
bar
that.
exams, and you're like, what in the world is this thing?
Yeah.
That changed the conversation. Now
Okay.
executives understand. I may not understand it. I may not know exactly what it is, but I need to pay attention to this because this is disruptive. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's the number one advancement. The second would be in the GPU and edge computing space, because
Okay.
to make this work, you've got to have really powerful computing systems to do this. And I think that's probably the next 2 that I would say are also, there have been a lot of advancements in that in the last 12 to 18 months.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. So it's really interesting that it took Chat GPT to change the minds of buyers within supply chain. It's such an interesting kind of pivotal point in, I guess, in sales for AI and robotics. So was it kind of almost like a switch clicked overnight, and they all of a sudden had a bit more of an awareness of kind of what the conversation was, or how did that adapt and how did the conversation change there?
Yeah, well, let me say it's not everybody. It's not everywhere,
Yeah.
but the ones that there definitely has been a difference. And I would say that you now can have a conversation where you can correlate your product and service and how it depends upon and leverages AI
Yeah.
to their experience with Chat GPT. And so the ability to say this is a general foundation model with generative AI. So the more data it has access to, the smarter it gets. And
Yeah.
being able to put some examples together around what your product is doing and how it's leveraging AI to what their experience has been with Chat GPT is the way that it's helped those conversations move forward. And sometimes it's just the awareness. It's just, I don't know what this is. I don't know how it's doing this, but I see that this is disruptive and I've got to at least get my team on it or put some resources behind understanding it, because it's definitely something that's going to change the industry.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Well, very nice talking about the innovations in the industry, kind of moving more into what I would consider my expertise, the field of recruiting within warehouse automation. So we've talked about attracting talent to the industry, from a gender diversity point of view. We've talked about disruptive technology, but as a sales leader, as a leader in the space, where do you actually see the next generation of talent coming from, and how do you attract and recruit from it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's probably one that I need to spend more time thinking about.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I have kids that range from 14 to one that'll be 28 in November. hate to even say. So I have kids. I have 5 kids, and they are in all different stages of life at different ages. I've got one
Yeah.
that's married, one's about to get married, you name it. And
Wow.
what I see is in interacting with them and their friends, they're starting to get into the workforce and they think about work in a different way. And
Mhm.
so, one of the exciting things for robotics is a lot of these kids would never, ever have thought about or wanted to go and work in a warehouse.
Yeah.
But when you talk about going and working with an AI robotics system, that is exciting. And
Mhm.
so it's the ability to evolve some of the jobs that are being done in supply chain to be something that is going to be more interesting to some of the younger folks that are coming through. And I think there's great programs now starting to focus on tech schools and this emphasis that not everyone has to go to a 4-year university. There are great programs that are a tech path, and I think that some of that is also an area that we could spend more time recruiting from and pulling from, particularly when it comes to some of the very technical maintenance that needs to be done on some of these systems that you need in-house in your warehouse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess supply chain and warehouse automation specifically is a traditionally network heavy kind of recruitment industry. So how do we move away from not network heavy recruitment? Because we discussed that earlier on. It's good to work with known entities, but how do we supplement our network hires with these young kind of generation of talent and I guess the future leaders of automation?
Yeah, I think you have to really think about what your sales team needs. What
Yeah.
kind of product are you really selling? And that is going to inform you on where you can go to look for some different talent. For example, if you are a tech startup in the supply chain space and you are in growth mode, then you're going to need some people that can sell a vision because you don't have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of installs and 100 years of doing something. So you need a different skill set, and that skill set needs to be able to sell the vision of something and the outcome that's going to be produced, which is not a tangible. It's very different than selling a widget that they can see and they know exactly what it's going to do and they can predict exactly what the payback or the results are going to be of that.
Yeah.
Those are different skill sets. And so I think it really depends on what is the product or service that your sales team is taking to market. And then you look at that and say, okay, what are the skill sets that really are needed to be successful at this? And then you go and find different profiles that would work for that skill set. And some of the SaaS companies are great ones to look at because there's a lot of different roles in a SaaS business that's primarily software focused, that those folks can have a good 1 to 3 years in some of those SDR or MDR roles that give them a really good base of understanding of sales skills that then you can take from there and put into a more junior role on your team. So
Yeah.
those are some of the places I would say to look.
Nice. Okay. That last question was actually from the last episode from the last exec, which is Jerry. So it comes on to something that I've completely nicked from Dario, the CEO, but making it my own. What questions do you want to ask of your fellow supply chain executives? What are you interested to learn about from them?
I would love to learn about how do they think about AI. Because when I ask this question, it is a wide range of answers. But
Yeah,
that would be something I'd love to know. How do you think about it, and how do you think about leveraging it in your business?
amazing. Okay. Well, I'm sure that will give whoever's next an interesting bit of research to do before they answer that one. um,
Yep.
I really appreciate your time and your insight, Heather. It's been really good to learn a bit about kind of your background, how you see the next generation of talent coming through the industry. And yeah, thank you for being episode number 2 for the Industry Innovators, as we're calling it. And yeah, appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks very much.